If they're not here, they meant to send apologies because I think some of you have got a busy night on. Okay, declaration of interest. Councillor Norcup.
So yes, Chair, thank you. I've got non-pecuniary interest in the Health Scrutiny Committee, item 5. Thank you.
Okay. Minutes of previous meeting. Do we agree? Councillor Brown.
Chair, could I ask, it's a matter arising really, on page 4 of the minutes, I asked a question about tree maintenance, and Officer Andrew Bird said that you now have a tree maintenance programme, and I see the portfolio holder is here. Would it be possible for elected members to have sight of the tree maintenance programme, please?
Sorry, the last bit of your conversation got lost.
That's okay. On page 4 of the minutes, there's reference to a tree maintenance plan that I asked about. I would request that elected members have sight of the borough's tree maintenance plan, please.
Can I ask Andrew to get that round?
Certainly, Chair. I'll make.
If he needs to be back in for cabinet update. Anybody else on the cabinet got any updates? Right. We might have to come back to that, seeing if I've just given my phone for technical reasons. And the technical reasons might be for the next one. Hold on. Staffordshire Health and Care Scrutiny Committee to receive their feedback. Any comments? Okay. Walleys Quarry update.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Vanessa.
Thank you, Chair. So members will have seen this report previously. It was a report that went to Cabinet in relation to the update for Walleys Quarry. What I will do is I'll concentrate in terms of the recent data. So the report covers the period April, May, June, and I'll concentrate in terms of those figures. So in relation to complaints from Walleys Quarry, the trends that's been seen is that those complaints rise and fall broadly in line with the H2S levels, that's hydrogen sulfide levels recorded at the monitoring stations around the site. In section 3.1 of your report, you can see the complaints there both to the Borough Council and to the Environment Agency. And you'll also see that there's complaints have peaked in both of those, and they're both consistent across the council and the Environment Agency, and that the trend is that the Environment Agency typically tends to have more complaints than the Borough Council. Members may also note that those complaints are actually slightly higher during those months than they had been previously, and the investigations in relation to that have been undertaken. So we have been looking at the root cause in relation to that. We've been undertaking site visits to them. We have been assessing the odour levels and undertaking visits both in and out of hours in relation to those. And members, you know, obviously the data is there from June, but it's what's happened actually since is those complaint levels have trailed off. The highest complaints were received on the 12th of June, and that's when 26 complaints were received in one day during June. And the longest period where we had over 10 complaints each day was between the 19th and the 21st of June. So it was for a period of 3 days. Section 4 of the report looks at the air quality monitoring stations, and members will be aware that there have been 4 of those that have been operational for about 2 years now around the site. In June 2023, one of those was removed, and that was the one that's the MMF6, which was located at Newcastle Fire Station. And the reason for that it was consistently recording 0 results or 0 levels, and that can be seen from the table in section 4.2. The MMF6 you can see have got a 0% exceedance. And I think if we look at that table, it is quite typical during this 3-month period, the same results as we have historically seen. The MMF9, which is the one at Gallingale View, has tended to have the highest percentage exceedance level of the H2S levels. Now, that percentage exceedance level is an exceedance of the WHO annoyance threshold, which is a 7 micrograms cubic meter measured over 30-minute average period. The graph on top of page 5 in the report shows that correlation between complaints and the hydrogen sulfide levels at the monitoring station. And you can see the 2 lines show the complaints to Newcastle Borough Council and the Environment Agency. And again, those trends are very, very consistent. We do get the complaints when there are the peaks in the hydrogen sulfide levels. So section 5 of the report updates in terms of the Environment Agency, who are the principal regulators, their involvement with the site. And you can see that during June, they've actually undertaken 4 visits to the site. And if we turn over the page to the next table, that gives a summary in terms of the extraction rate of gas from the site or at the gas utilisation plant, and also the hydrogen sulfide levels. And you can see they're quite consistent around 3,300 to 3,500 metre cube per hour gas extraction rate. And hydrogen sulfide level is reasonably consistent, you know, around the 2,000 mark or just below. I think going back to June, we also held a public engagement event at Newcastle Fire Station, where most of the multi-agencies attended. We were able to engage with members of the community, answer their questions, talk about their lived experience. And they could obviously ask us in terms of the event. So 47 people attended that community event. I think it's the 3rd or 4th one that's been done throughout the incident. I think just moving through the report, I won't go through in a lot of detail, but at Appendix 3 and 4 of the report are the monthly KPIs that are both reported in relation to Newcastle Borough Council's activities and also the KPIs reported by Walleys Quarry Limited. So I think in terms of the summary, that's most probably the information that I'd go through, but Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has anything specifically.
Has any councillors got any questions? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Pocock.
Thank you, Chair. Nesta, you talked us through the correlation between the hydrogen levels and the complaints, and there's a strong correlation there. Are we seeing correlations between the numbers of complaints and incidents reported to us by Red Industries of activities on site, which they have improved, haven't they, in their communication of those? But we're wondering if there's a correlation, for example, on the 12th of June, 26 complaints.
We have looked into that, and you can't say there's such a strong correlation. There's some occasions whereby they are undertaking works on site. So, you know, one of the things that they do undertake is drilling of gas wells, and those, you know, type of activities, you know, could give rise to complaints. And we haven't always necessarily seen the corresponding levels. Obviously, we go through control measures with them, and, you know, they put in adequate measures to, you know, contain and capture any of those odours. So some occasions there is some correlation, other occasions there isn't, but it's not as clear as the correlation that you can see in that graph between complaints and H2S levels.
That's interesting. Thank you.
Councillor Adcock, sorry, I keep calling you Alcock. Alcock is my insurance collector, and it looks, you know, starts the same and ends the same.
Oh, I'll forgive you on that one, Chair. Yeah, some very great data in this report. I think it's overall positive that we're seeing these odor complaints and over time start to fall. Although we do get these random spikes now and then, which do seem to be quite random. But overall, I'm thinking we're smelling it a bit less, and I think we're making some good progress. And I really welcome the work that's being done here. Of course, we've got one monitoring station now closed. Has the council had any communication about the other monitoring stations? Because I would assume now that EA would start to think about the others. But I know that, in my own opinion anyway, we're not ready yet, I would say, to lose the other monitoring stations, because I'd like to see, as we go into colder weather, if that affects the site anymore. So has the council received anything about the other monitoring stations and their future?
No, we haven't. And obviously it's something that we part fund along with the county council. We actually part fund those. So, you know, we would be engaged in those discussions. As far as I'm aware, those are remaining, and you know, and like yourself, they are very valuable in terms of our investigation in relation to the site.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, officers, for a really comprehensive report. My question is, for those of us who've been living with this a long time, we know that this time of the year is the least concerned time of the year for us as residents, because due to the various atmospheric conditions, we don't tend to get the worst of the odours now. It's as we move into the autumn weather and into winter, when we start to see higher moisture levels in the air, that we really do get the smell returning. I guess my question is, following on slightly from the previous councillor, is, are you confident? I'm seeing here a very metric-based system with KPIs, which gives me confidence. Are you confident in this system should we approach bad odours again to the levels we've seen in the past over the autumn winter? And what is the process from your perspective of if we start to reach those dreadful levels that we've had in the past?
Councillor, you're absolutely correct. You know, there is an impact, you know, or a contribution in terms of weather that can equally impact in terms of the odour levels detected. So yes, the summer period does tend to be the period where it is a lot calmer, and you would expect to have, you know, fewer complaints. That's the trend that we have seen and we've been reporting throughout the time period. So in terms of the work, obviously the Environment Agency has done a lot of work at the site. There is far more capping of the site. So their programme was to capture, contain and destroy. So, you know, the increased capping in there will improve the situation and has shown that. And I think that's some of the improved data there that we've got. The containment is what we monitor in terms of the gas capture rates and the hydrogen sulfide level. So that's an indicator of those, and that's remaining very, very constant. And then the destruction of it is obviously through the flares and the gas utilisation plant. Obviously, it is an evolving site. Things change. Last winter is in a very different position than what this winter is. And I think it's working on that and ensuring that the practices and processes on that site are up to date. They're as best as they can. As you know, we're regularly meeting with Walleys Quarry, and, you know, those are parts of our discussion that actually, you know, what is the, you know, more that can be done. And we do know that we're going into that period of time where there's far more uncertainty. So we're trying to put in as much as we can to ensure that there is improvement year on year in terms of those winter periods. Can I come back to the second part of the question? You asked in terms of what we could do. Obviously, the Environment Agency is there, and, you know, they're one regulator in relation to that. Any action that we could take would be in respect of a potential breach of the abatement notice. So we would have to determine that you know, there was a statutory nuisance, there was a breach of the abatement notice that was caused, and prove to a point beyond reasonable doubt, you know, that would be at a level that we could progress that through, you know, any proceedings. We also have to look into account the defence mechanisms that they do have in relation to that. And I think we went through at the council meeting in April, the detailed process that would involve. So that is always an option. That notice is still live, it's still valid, you know, and it's a case of monitoring their compliance against that, you know, prevention of a statutory nuisance.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much. Just really not so much a question, but just a statement really to be aware that I think we as an authority have to be aware of the fact that due to the tonic level of the odours being much lower, and I will say that the tonic level of the odour has been much, much lower than it has been in the past, that we're dealing with very sensitive receptors in the case of the nose. And residents are going to pick up what might have been a very mild odour previously. They're going to pick up as a very significant impact and change, which may see the complaint numbers scale up quite significantly and potentially out of kilter with the sulfide levels that we're measuring via the the detectors. And it's just really to be aware of that, because us as councillors, we quite often get the raw end of that, where residents are saying, you know, it's no good telling me that it smells better overall, it still smells awful. And I think it's just to make sure that we're aware that residents are going to be more sensitive to small spikes in odour than they would have been maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago.
Any other questions? Okay, right, we're nipping back to number 4 for a cabinet update, because my technical operator who answered the phone for me. Fire away, mate.
Looking over the minutes of the previous Health, Wellbeing and Environment Scrutiny Committee, there were no outstanding items. All cabinet items and minutes were marked as resolved. I apologise to Councillor Brown. I hadn't noticed. I scanned the minutes. I saw everything as resolved. I didn't notice in the detail that it does say that we're going to come back to with the tree planting strategy. So I'll speak to the Sustainable Environment Director tomorrow, and I will come back to you on that one.
Thank you, Councillor.
The Cabinet has met once since the last Health, Wellbeing and Environment Scrutiny Committee meeting. The Sustainable Environment had 3 items on that agenda. With your permission, Chair, I would like to update the committee on one of the items discussed at the last Cabinet meeting, and it concerns the collection of our food waste. Newcastle under Lyme Borough Council is a leader. We do not follow, we lead. We have collected food waste since 2010. We're one of the first authorities in the country to do so. The previous contract for processing our food waste was procured and started in 2015, and that ended in August 2023. There was an option to extend the previous contract for another year, taking it until August 2024. However, the collection of food waste from all households, including flats, will become mandatory in England in 2025. So our great sustainable environment team have already started pilots of collecting food waste from flats and multi-residential properties in the borough. Different flat locations pose different challenges, and we've been looking at each flat location on its own and addressing those challenges. At the moment, the market for processing the separate food waste is currently very competitive, with plenty of capacity in the Midlands to take separately collected food waste from the local authority collections. As we get closer to the DEFRA 2025 deadline, when all authorities must collect food waste from all properties, any spare capacity in the system will become quickly absorbed, and which will change the supply and demand dynamics considerably. With this in mind, we decided not to extend the previous contract and to start the new procurement process in June 2023, to get in early with a new contract to ensure best value for the council and for the residents. There were 5 bidders on the procurement food waste contract. The Sustainable Environment Director and myself, the Sustainable Environment Portfolio Holder, we proposed to Cabinet that we award the food waste contract to the Biotech 4 company. Biotech 4 is the UK's leading anaerobic digestive operator. They have now been receiving food waste from our curbside collections in the Newcastle under Lyme Borough since the beginning of August 2023. Our food waste is collected and delivered to a location near Telford in Shropshire. The anaerobic digestion is the sustainable process of turning food waste into renewable energy, which then goes back into the national grid. The Biotech 4 site, which covers 7 acres in Shropshire, could process up to 90,000 tonnes of food waste a year. Potentially that could result in enough energy to power 15,000 homes. The process, one of the byproducts, the process also produces biofertilizer, a nutrient-rich organic material used to fertilise farmland, hopefully in Shropshire and also in Staffordshire. The new contract is bringing in approximately 80,000 extra revenue per annum to the Borough Council in its first year, and more from year 2 when we collect from flats, when the collection from flats is rolled out. So the contract will benefit the residents and the environment. So I think it's very much a win-win contract. Our waste and recycling service is a service in which we can be very proud. One final thing, Chair, if I may, members of the Health, Wellbeing and Scrutiny Committee may not be aware that our recycling and waste services have been selected as a national finalist in the Association for Public Service Excellent Awards, that's the APSE Awards, for the best service team in the waste management and recycling service category. These awards are extremely competitive, with over 300 submissions from across the UK in each category. Only the very best submissions, I believe it's the top 8, have been selected and shortlisted in each category, and reaching the finals in the 2023 awards is a fantastic achievement. The nomination recognises the Newcastle under Lyme Borough Council Waste Management and Recycling Service, therefore to be in the top 8 in the country. A recognition for all the hard work that all the staff members put in. The award ceremony is 1 week today. It's Thursday, the 14th of September. So I hope all members here tonight will join with me in wishing our waste management and recycling team the very best of luck. Thank you.
A lot about that. Okay, right. We'll get back on track. Have we any speakers for the homeless?
Yes.
They're hiding. Right. We will not ignore you then. Right. So item 7. You better introduce yourself, I suppose. The floor is yours.
Hi, I'm Christelle Aldami. I'm the Rough Sleeper and Homelessness Lead for Newcastle Borough Council. And I'm here to give you a little overview of what we've been doing to date and the initiatives that we've got going on at the moment. Just to give you some background, our funding is external funding for the services that we do, and it's acquired through the Department of Levelling Up Housing and Communities, otherwise known as DLUC, which I'm sure all of you are aware of. We've been successful in acquiring some Rough Sleeper Initiative funding for 3 years, from July 2022 till March 2025. That funding has enabled us to create a support pathway to support our rough sleepers and reduce our rough sleepers, and ultimately that is our goal. So we've been able to create basically a pathway of a reactive, preventative and recovery support pathway that we've been looking at. We've been able to hire people to kind of be able to put that into practice. So the roles that we've currently got is a rough sleeper navigator, and that person goes out, does the outreach, verifies people, and then what they do is they put referrals through to other agencies, housing accommodation providers, through to drug and alcohol services, whatever the need of that person is, they put those forward. Then that person is then, once they're accommodated, we have, oh, it's getting very noisy in here. We have the tenancy sustainment officer, and what that person does is works with that individual once they're housed. So we don't just house them and leave them. We continue to work with them and support them in terms of enable them to get budgeting, to get their bills sorted and whatever else they need. Then we move down the pathway to the recovery aspect, which is the support officer. And what that person does is works with that individual to look at some diversionary activities, whether it's going back into education, volunteering, whatever is necessary to help that person with their recovery journey and to get into that pathway where they are engaging back within the community and giving back a little bit. We also jointly commission some services with Stoke City Council. They include our rough sleeper coordinator, and the idea behind that role is to problem solve and unblock any of those difficult, complex individuals that we have, and to escalate cases where need be. We also commission a homeless healthcare worker, which is ultimately a nurse that can prescribe and look after the physical well-being of the individuals that we work with. And we also commission Brighter Futures, which is our rough sleeper outreach service that goes out at various hours in the day, 365 days a week, to verify and assess customers on the streets. We've also been successful in acquiring some funding through the Shared Prosperity Fund, and with that we've been able to plug some of the gaps within our service. So we've been able to acquire a discharge officer, and that role looks and works with individuals coming out of prisons and hospitals with no fixed address. So rather than them coming out and going straight on the street, and the work that's been put in place in those institutions, it's kind of gone to waste and we're starting from scratch. They will pick them up beforehand. They link in with the prisons, probations, hospitals, put care plans in, and try to make sure that when they come out, they're coming to somewhere that's safe and suitable for them. We can pick up that work and work with them. We've also commissioned a mental health liaison worker, and that person looks at the mental health, the need of the individual. They work with them to get them into the services and to see them through from A to B into a place where they are at point of recovery. We've also commissioned a housing outreach advisor. So that person goes out at all hours in the morning, like our navigator, to do housing assessments and to put referrals in for those individuals and to pursue those, so that we're not just going through emergency accommodation, temporary accommodation, that we're looking for something long-term and sustainable. So we've got something all the way through. What else? Multi-agency hub. We also run a multi-agency homelessness hub that runs twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The idea behind that is that we wanted to create a one-stop shop. A lot of the cohort and the individuals we work with don't always attend appointments and miss things. So we've created a place where they can come in and can access some food and then access services that are present there. So it negates the need for appointments and they can get services straight away. Currently at our hub, we have over 25 agencies. Those include DWP, CAB, obviously the healthcare workers, the rough sleep team, the team that we have, housing associations, and everyone's present there. We can see people, we can get them assessed. STARS, which is our drug and alcohol service, are also there. Mental health are there. Get them assessed and get them into services a lot quicker than having to wait for appointments and rely for them to turn up. That runs twice a week. We've also created some temporary accommodation pathways as well with registered landlord providers, Aspire. So we've created 3 pathways. We call them bronze, silver and gold. The bronze are family units, and they are to support Newcastle housing with families that present that don't have anywhere to go. So we've got somewhere to put them in immediately, even if it's in the middle of the night, if they're calling in, needing somewhere, they can access that provision while work is being done in the background to find them something more long-term and suitable. The silver option is currently 8 single units. Again, is to support those individuals that need some support. That comes with 2.7 hours of support per week. And it's to support individuals that are in there while work's being done to look at something more long-term. And then the gold option is funded through the rough sleeper accommodation program. And again, that's through DLUC, and that is 6 units, single units as well. And that comes with a support worker to support those individuals that need a little bit more intense work and a little bit more support. And again, we all work together. Partnership working is key in this, in the area that we work in. It's not something that housing can fix alone or drug and alcohol can fix alone. It's about that partnership working, which is why we work so closely together and we all come together to do that. Anything else that I've missed? Oh, yeah. We also have a provision called SWEP, which is the Severe Winter Emergency Protocol provision that we have. So between November and March every year, we have to ensure that we provide a night shelter type accommodation for those most vulnerable, most at risk, which are rough sleepers, to ensure that they're not out on the street when temperatures hit 0 or below. We had a night shelter provision that we ran with a charity last year, a 7-bed provision that worked really well. We had some great success stories of those individuals. We were able to work with them and able to move them into something more long-term and sustainable. So that's really positive. And we'll be obviously looking at doing that again this year. I think that's all the homelessness and rough sleeping that I've got. Is there anything I've missed?
I think it's most probably for me to carry on in terms of that. And, you know, obviously rough sleeping is one element of it, but that's not the only form of homelessness that we're dealing with. You know, obviously there's an increased number of households where the homelessness is becoming a larger issue. And that can be because of evictions from homes, you know, people that are sofa surfing, relationship breakdowns and those sorts of things. They can also present to the council in relation to these. So where there are no other housing options and where there is a priority and we have a duty to deal with those, they may be placed into the temporary accommodation. Some of those schemes that we've already mentioned are ones that we utilise, but also we have to look at other temporary accommodation forms such as bed and breakfast. And I think in terms of the report at page 7, we've just given you some data in terms of the number of those types of households that are presenting to us, either individuals or households. And I think, as you can see, in terms of 21 or 22, 23 compared to 23, 24, there is an increasing trend in terms of those presentations to us. So it is unfortunately something that is increasing. Again, that is something that we do operate an out of hours service for, you know, for those emergency presentations where we do have a duty to house and in an emergency situation. So we deal with those as well. But I think in terms of an update and in terms of the provision, what we're providing, the enhanced support that we are giving to homelessness, that most probably covers in terms of all the areas, and I think we'll be happy to take any questions.
Beforehand, I think I better declare interest, as in I'm in one of the hotels that you put them in. So, so any other councillors who've got a right? Well, work from the front to the back. So, Councillor Reeds.
Hi, thanks for that overview. It's really good to hear about those initiatives and projects. Just a quick question around major risks. If indeed at the end of March 2025 funding round you aren't successful in obtaining further ongoing funding, are there any contingency plans or will services just cease with subsequent job losses?
I'm not used to this. So we work with the Department of Levelling Up, and we have an advisor that we kind of liaise with in terms of that is a question that I'm constantly presenting to them. What happens after 2025 and how can we continue this on? So the RSI funding has been going on since 2018 and it's continued to roll over. Now I know the government stance is that, you know, they're looking at kind of ending, eradicating rough sleeping by 2027, or certainly making it rare. So the advice we're always getting is that they don't see why funding will not continue because there is a need for it. Obviously, this is something that we've got to look at and take into consideration, but it's been around since 2018 and it has continued, and it's not something that has gone away. We've made, you know, huge impact in certain terms of the differences we've made because of that funding. And I think if we continue to demonstrate that, hopefully that will continue.
Okay, thanks for that. Oh, I was just going to ask, did you know when those kind of next funding rounds are likely to be?
So this funding round is up till 2025, March 2025.
Yes,
so
but when you have to kind of submit again.
They will announce that. They haven't announced anything yet.
So you're not too sure when that will be?
No.
Okay,
No.
thanks.
No problem.
Councillor Burnett.
I think you've missed Councillor Jones at the end.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you there, mate. You have to wave. Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much. Can you sort of talk me through what involvement veterans charities have had with the Homelessness Hub? We do have issues occasionally where some of our homelessness residents within the borough are veterans, and as part of our pledge, as part of the Armed Forces Covenant, certainly in the hospital, we recognise when veterans are coming in. I just didn't see anything in here at all about the involvement of veterans charities, and I wonder if you could talk me through that a little bit.
So we work very closely with, they were known as Veterans Connect. They are now known as C2CH, which is Connect to Combat Homelessness. We've worked with them for the last couple of years. So they do work closely with veterans and stuff. We don't have very many homeless or rough sleeper veterans that come in, but there is extra provision out there for them if we do, but we do work closely with the charity. They come and do outreach with us, they come to the hub, and so we do have very close links with them. And if there are any veterans rough sleeping, they are picked up very quickly and they are signposted to the right place for them. Okay.
I know you can't talk about individual cases, and we've had a quick word earlier on about a situation. But I'm getting feedback from some of my residents saying, how come that some of these homeless people can pitch up a tent and live in this tent and we can't move them on? But if it's a traveller in a caravan, we can take them to court and get them moved on. So can I have some explanation as what's the difference that I can pass on to my residents, please?
Specific requirements in relation to travellers, and obviously the responsibility for moving anybody on is a responsibility of the landowner. So it very much depends in terms of where tents are pitched and what action is taken. So a lot of them you can often see they'll be on other people's lands, private land. Yeah, so that would be the responsibility of the county if they wanted to take action to move those on. Obviously, what we want to do is to try and engage and support those and try and find a more permanent resolution to the issue in terms of homelessness.
Councillor Barker.
My question is, I run a community one-stop shop. So I have been running it 22 years, and the community come in and expect me to know everything. But 2 weeks ago, there was a prime example. I had a lady with her little girl come in. There was a couple across the road on the churchyard behind these bushes, and in front of this lady as she was walking down, the man knocked hell out of the woman. I'd got no phone numbers, I didn't know who to ring, and I rang 999 and I got no answer there. You can't watch somebody, they got all the taxi driver, they phoned for a taxi, and I think in the end he refused to put them in the taxi. Who do we phone? I'm desperately need phone numbers to help these people, but to protect the community as well.
If it's an incident like that, that's definitely a police matter. So you would have to contact the police. I mean, I can't speak as to why you didn't get through to the 9. I can't answer that. But what I can do is I will come and speak to you at the end and give you some of our numbers. And if it's rough sleeper related or anything like that, we can sort that out. No problem.
Any other questions? Right, I've got one for you. Speaking out of turn, really, because it's we deal with lots of councils in my workplace. I do nights. We always have, if there's going to be a problem between 2 o'clock and 5 o'clock, we're in the same position. We can't get hold of anybody. We do end up after having the police, but if it's a mental health issue, the police are not going to start coming out. So it leaves the night staff vulnerable to what they did. I will say, and I know I'm biased, but the Newcastle Council, yourselves, do actually ring up and find out if there has been any problem. We have some that literally drop them off at the door with black bin bags and go. So you do actually make contact, which we're glad about. But again, we could do with numbers. Okay. Ellen, allotment review. All over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, we were obviously asked to bring this paper to this committee around the allotment waiting list. So we've obviously outlined within the report our current number of plots, which we have. We've got 6 sites that we manage directly ourselves. Current occupancy on those sites is around 98% currently, but we do have a waiting list that's sitting at currently at about 524. And depending on where they are on the waiting list and which site they're looking for, some people can remain on that list for quite a few years before they get offered a plot. There are other providers besides ourselves, so parish councils have allotment sites around the borough. And there is also one private site that's in the borough as well, which is over in Madeley. Obviously over those sites, we've done a sort of little bit of inquiry, and we think there's roughly 310 plots over the sites that have been provided by others within the borough as well, and their waiting lists are considerably smaller than ours as well. We do have an allotment strategy, which is going to be reviewed shortly. But there is a guiding sort of policy within that we look towards self-management and having committees running their own allotments. So that's something obviously we always encourage, obviously, with even within our current allotments for them to potentially to manage them themselves as well. What happened significantly, our waiting list typically was around the 150-200 mark until we had COVID, and that was when the interest rose, and obviously with the cost of living crisis as it is as well at the moment, that is maintaining that interest in the allotments. When we've looked around in terms of locations, the people on our waiting list are scattered quite evenly across the borough. So there isn't a one particular location where we could say there's a higher demand for allotments. And obviously any demands obviously within the rural areas should be managed by the parish councils, because they're the allotment providers in those areas. Obviously the creation and operation of a new site would have quite a significant impact, both financially and resources on resources for the borough. But what we could do is obviously support the establishment of a group that would be willing to set up and run an allotment site, where we'd be able to give them advice around setting up the committees and funding and obviously actually and getting something up and running. And following on from the report that's been published as well, within the open space strategy, there's been identified that there's a small shortfall in allotment provision across the whole of the borough, which equates roughly to 1 hectare of land, which isn't enough to meet the demand of the 500 people on the waiting list. But there's also a requirement within that developers who are bringing on new housing sites over 250 dwellings, where we can actually ask them to either contribute or provide allotments as well. So that's something obviously we will do in terms of trying to sort of mitigate any losses. So because obviously that provision is there currently within our policies. So that's where we are really with our allotments. Obviously a site could be provided, but a site isn't going to take away those 524 people who are on those waiting lists. And obviously, in terms of managing it so that it doesn't significantly increase impact on any resources, both financially, ideally a community-led site would be the most appropriate. So yeah, any questions from that really? So
work from the middle row forward. Councillor Diamond.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Becky. As you know, I'm very much trying to get allotments wherever I can find a patch of land. Thank you very much for your help in the past, but I will still keep asking that the tennis courts are still not being used in Kidsgrove. And please, can we have some raised beds in the, and the tennis courts not being used in Birchwood either. So that's 2 plots I've found.
Councillor Jones, I've seen you. Don't worry.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much to the officer for that update. I have to say, I had a read through things and through the strategy ahead of time, and I think that really it needs a bit of an ignition and a rocket firing up it, because demand for allotments is growing, and as a council, sustainability is one of our very key themes. And residents are more likely to grow their own veg if there is suitable facilities. And there's a lot of work that's been done on, if you restrict the ease of acquiring the ability to go and grow your own veg, such as a long waiting list, then people will give up and then may not start again. I have to say, I was completely unaware that within our policies, we have the ability to ask developers over 200 properties, was it? Over 250 properties to contribute to allotments. And as somebody who sat on planning for a long time now, I can't recall once that has been a recommendation within the 106 agreement at planning, which I think disappoints me a lot, because we have had some big developments where this could have been part of a 106 agreement, particularly developments in areas where we have a shortage of allotments, and could have helped resolve those waiting lists. So I guess what I'm asking is, why are we not getting these recommendations at planning through 106? Was it?
The recommendation in terms of the allotments is actually something that's come out of the most up-to-date open space strategy, which has not long been adopted. So that is probably why you haven't seen them previously. Obviously there's, you know, and again, you've got to have the sites of the right size coming forward as well. So
can we ensure that every development that comes through that meets that threshold has that recommendation in it, please?
Hi, thanks for that overview, Becky. Obviously, the report recognises the demand for allotment plots outstrip their supply. The report doesn't address, I suppose, operational changes to reduce waiting lists, such as, you know, smaller plot sizes. But can I ask specifically, when was the last time that council managed allotments were inspected by officers?
they're inspected twice a year. So it's usually in the springtime and then usually again in the autumn. So they are inspected. That's that's our sort of agreed sort of frequency of inspection. So, but even once it's inspected and we've determined a site potentially not to be being looked after, we do spend time contacting the plot holder. We don't just instantly throw them off. We will try, because sometimes there's a reason as to why they're not tending the plot. So we do give people the opportunity to come back and actually start to work the plot as well, before we go down the eviction route.
Thanks for that. Do we know how many plots were considered to be abandoned or neglected?
I don't have those exact figures, but other than at the moment, I know our occupancy is about 98%. So it's just that sort of 2%, but I couldn't tell you what that is in plot numbers. So.
Okay. And just a suggestion, really, for in future, applicants for allotments who don't have gardens or tiny gardens, I think they should probably get priority over those who do have gardens, particularly if demand outstrips supply. Is that something you would consider?
We obviously, when we look to review the policy, that's something we can look to include in that, so that it's it becomes a policy basis rather than people thinking that we're picking and choosing who gets a plot. So
when we'll be next looking at policy.
So we haven't got it timetabled in yet, but we will be looking to timetable the review in. So
okay, thanks for that.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Becky. Right, sorry gentlemen, but you're loving ducks to me because I didn't grab your names. So if you'd like to introduce yourselves.
Yeah, no problem. I'm Rob Barber. I'm the Chief Fire Officer. Evening, everybody. I'm Glyn Lugeny. I'm Deputy Chief Fire Officer.
Evening all. I'm Andy Bourne. I'm the station manager at the local fire station at Newcastle.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, councillors, for inviting us here to your scrutiny meeting this evening. I know when I met with Councillor Sweeney and Councillor Tagg and others earlier this year down at the fire station, and the offer was made to come to the scrutiny meeting, we were more than happy to do so. I also think that regular attendance by the local station manager will provide an opportunity for you to inquire about current risks and issues that we're facing as a service, but more importantly, to talk about and through the detail regarding performance in Newcastle Borough. I'm also aware that there was a recent motion brought to the full council meeting regarding our approach, our new approach or trial into the way in which we mobilise our resources. And as such, we're happy to provide the overview of the rationale for the trial, the expected outcomes, and the feedback that we've gained so far partway through the trial. When I was watching the council meeting live, there were a few inaccuracies and assumptions being discussed. And in order to have a transparent, open discussion tonight, we thought it would be good to discuss those in the first instance prior to moving on to the local performance, if that's agreeable to the chair. Thank you. So before we go into the trial, I'd just like to talk about the most recent inspection that Staffordshire Fire and Rescue Service had by His Majesty's Inspectorate for Constabularies and Fire and Rescue Services, which was carried out in August 2021, which recommended a number of improvements that needed to be acted upon. I would just like to draw your attention to two of these this evening because it's very closely related to the trial. Firstly, they said that the service should make sure that it improves the availability of its fire engines to respond to incidents in line with its integrated risk management plan. Secondly, the service needs to review its reliance upon overtime and to consider whether there are more effective arrangements to provide its core service. So with these recommendations in mind, we've been developing a number of new approaches in order to ensure we meet these recommendations. The mobilising of resources is one such approach, and we've been exploring and designing improvement on attendance times and our appliance availability. As Chief Fire Officer with the responsibility of delivering a flexible service to the public, I cannot rely on traditional approaches in order to deliver the most efficient service to our community. On-call availability has been an issue within the sector for the whole of my career, which is about 26 years. And it is not limited to Staffordshire. This is a national issue, and all services with an on-call establishment are facing the same or similar issues that we're discussing tonight. I'd just like to pick up on a couple of the issues that were raised in the motion and weren't covered off in the briefing note that was supplied on the evening. There was a point made in the motion regarding the reduction in our workforce over a 10-year period, with a figure of 50% being stated. This data had been gained from a Freedom of Information request. However, the data that was published was inaccurate. The accurate data that can be found on the government statistics page, which was updated on the 11th of May 2023, actually demonstrates that the true reduction has been 29% and not 50% as stated. This reduction has been a result of continuous budget reductions over the last 10 years. And as 80% of our budget is people, we've had to reduce the headcount in order to balance the budget. The other issue raised within the motion, and one which was closely related to tonight's discussion, is that of attendance times. Now, attendance times are made up of many factors, which I won't go into this evening. However, what I will say is that the availability of personnel and appliances has a significant impact upon overall attendance times. If the availability of personnel is reduced, then the travel times of the next nearest appliance is clearly adversely affected. Therefore, in order to address these issues and those identified by the Inspectorate, the service are exploring a whole host of approaches in order to improve the response to the community need. I cannot merely hope that by continuing to apply traditional approaches, the attendance times and the availability will simply improve. The Inspectorate have been very clear in that they expect services to be able to demonstrate that they have tried multiple approaches to improving both attendance times and availability, which is exactly what this trial is attempting to do. We need to be flexible in our approach in order to meet the needs of our communities. Our position in Staffordshire is that we're still committed to having 4 firefighters riding on on-call appliances and 5 firefighters on whole-time appliances. With the 3 riders rather than, however, when these numbers cannot be achieved, we will mobilise appliances with 3 riders rather than having no attendance or a delayed attendance while we wait for an appliance of 4 riders. There are many actions that the 3 riders and these professional firefighters can achieve at an incident rather than not attending at all. And I believe that we are best serving our communities by providing some resources rather than no resource at all. I'll now just ask the Deputy Chief Fire Officer, Glyn Loosney, to talk through some of the detail of the trial, how it was developed, and what we're seeing in terms of feedback from the crews that are attending with 3 riders. Over to Glyn.
Thank you very much, Rob. So as the Chief Fire Officer has just outlined in his introduction, for decades, the service in Staffordshire has had on-call crews mobilised to incidents with a minimum of a crew of 4, and that constitutes 1 incident commander, 1 driver and 2 firefighters as a minimum. And there are huge challenges in maintaining that, and we've recognised that both nationally, but we've been working with Keele University locally to look at the best practice that's going on across the sector. And we've invested hundreds of thousands of pounds on an annual basis to try and improve our on-call recruitment, retention, our training, our skills and our reward for that system. And we're going to continue to do that. But as the Chief also said, there are many occasions where we cannot achieve that minimum of 4, but we could have appliances where there is an incident commander, a driver and a firefighter. And if that was the case at a local station and there was an incident with a property fire over the road or a car crash on the street corner, then traditionally that crew would not be mobilised to that scene. The next nearest fully crewed appliances would be the first ones that attend that scene. We recognise, as do other fire and rescue services nationally, some very close to us as well, that there may be the opportunity to deploy that reduced crew in a safe manner to make quick life-saving interventions. So as the Chief's outlined, really it's a binary choice for Staffordshire Fire and Rescue Service. We either use the limited crews of 3 that we have, or we don't, and we wait until the next nearest fully crewed resource is able to attend the scene. However, since the motion, I think it's made us reflect on the title. We do actually think that that is misleading because it's called a reduced crewing trial. But just to be clear, the service is not reducing the crew in any way, shape or form. We're simply utilising resources which are naturally limited because we feel that that can add value by providing a quicker response and faster interventions to improve our community safety. So that was the basis of the trial, asking our workforce, predominantly our on-call workforce, but the entirety of the makeup, including the representative bodies, what they think about this. And so after a period of extensive consultation and development of training, guidance, policy, procedures, ways to monitor, we actually went ahead and commenced the trial on the 1st of June this year. So we've been running for 3 months and the results so far are really quite compelling. So from that date, we've attended 172 emergency incidents as of today. And that doesn't include cover moves where the crews have been moved to plug gaps or make up additional crews. This is live emergency incidents. And there are no safety concerns reported by those crews attending those incidents. Some stations that are involved have actually seen their overall availability increased by as much as 30%. So it's making a real difference. That's not for every station, because those stations that have good on-call availability, where they often can meet that 4 number, then to them it hasn't made much of a difference. Andy knows that locally in Newcastle, it is making a significant difference to the crews here as well. And it's the same in Kidsgrove too. But on average, across the service, since the 1st of June, we've seen a 12.5 increase in availability, which is giving better fire cover and faster response times. Our crews tell us through the feedback when they attend these incidents as a crew of 3 that they feel safe dealing with these incidents. They are also evidencing a range of early interventions, whether that be simply dealing with the incident much quicker before the appliances that are going in support of them get there, actually relaying communications, importantly, managing the scene, promoting first aid and providing first aid. There's simple interventions that can be done that are increasing public safety and firefighter safety. We do acknowledge, though, that already there is some learning for the service. There has been some mobilisation errors. There's been some non-adherence to policy on a smaller scale. So we're very quick and transparent to bring those up with the representative bodies, the FBU, or they'll tell us as well. They're not backwards and coming forwards, and we work together to try and address them. But the big question for me is, what difference is this really making? And on Sunday, a local crew from Brood in Staffordshire, they attended as a crew of 3 a property fire that involved a tumble dryer. They were mobilised ahead of 2 other fully crewed appliances that, if they hadn't been available as a crew of 3, if we didn't do the trial, it would have been the next 2 appliances that would have attended. When they got there, the tumble dryer that had been on fire had already been removed by the property by neighbours, which evidences that people take actions at the scenes of these emergencies before the emergency services arrive, until the emergency services can attend and start to bring some order to an often chaotic scene. Unbeknown to the callers at the time, there was an elderly lady that lived at the property who was inside the property at the time of the fire, but thankfully she was with her daughter and she was able to exit the property safely. So that was not known before the call came into the fire service. However, the crew from Brood that attended first, they were able to fully extinguish the tumble dryer fire. And also they noticed that the elderly lady was suffering from smoke inhalation outside. So they were able to administer first aid and make sure that an ambulance attended. All of this was done before the next nearest 2 appliances attended. In fact, they were not required at all, and they were able to return to their home stations and provide the fire cover that was required. This shows that the crew of 3, had they not been mobilised, it raises that question: what would the outcome have been for the elderly lady? Would it have been any different? I'll leave you to consider that. But what it does demonstrate, and the big reflection back that I'm getting from crews, is that they are not doing this trial for financial reward. Indeed, they're not doing it to try and look at innovation and transforming the service, because, as I've said and the Chief has said, many other fire and rescue services are trialing this approach or have been operating it successfully for many years. They're doing it for some far deeper and human reason. They're doing it because it's the very reason that many of them joined the fire service in the first place. It's because they joined to protect and serve their communities and respond to emergencies. They are telling us they want to do this trial. Now, in terms of some of the concerns that have been raised that were highlighted through the motion, the Fire Brigades Union nationally holds a position of not supporting the riding of appliances with 3 persons. We recognise that. We recognise that that is a tension. Our industrial relations locally with the Fire Brigade Union officials and representatives is very good. It's very professional. And we have regular dialogue, both informally and formally, at all levels across the service and our governance boards. We do recognise that it's hard for them to support this particular trial. However, they have been involved with all aspects of consultation from the very start, and there's a recognition of common goals with the FBU and the service. The first one being, we both wish to improve the availability of our on-call staff per se, as the Chief's already outlined. We also recognise the constraints of funding within the system. We're both lobbying through different causes and rationale for more money to be put into the fire and rescue service sector. We both recognise that. So despite the areas of commonality, there is a difference of view over this particular trial. However, we are continuing to work with the FBU and addressing any concerns that they have. One concern that the FBU raised right from the start was the feeling that their members had that there may be some real moral pressure if a crew of 3 turn up to a house fire where it's known that there are persons trapped within that property. And the service have listened to that and put in safeguards around those particular incidents so that the crew of 3 won't be the first appliance that attends. We'll monitor that. We've also taken out certain incident types that they won't attend to alone, but they'll go in supporting additional crews to ensure that we get a whole host of firefighters at the scene as far as we possibly can. I mean, ultimately, the FBU will agree with us because it's within their statements that our firefighters are highly professional, highly trained, skilled individuals that are there to protect lives, to protect properties and render humanitarian services. So again, that common goal and interest. But in terms of the notion or the misconception that firefighters at certain incidents, when they turn up as a crew of 3, would blindly act and throw themselves into reckless danger, is not a vision. It's not a notion at all that I support. And it's certainly not one that's reflected back by our on-call staff doing this trial. Indeed, some of our incident commanders from the on-call have said they're quite offended because actually they're all trained. They all understand the principles of their own safety, and they are not going to take reckless decisions and risks. However, it's almost impossible to completely de-risk the fire and rescue service in their roles. We recognise that. But we use technology. We rely upon technology a lot. We've got the skills, we've got the equipment, we've got the policies and procedures to assist how we operate. But ultimately, this is about trust. And this is us as leaders trusting our incident commanders that when they go to an incident, they will observe what's going on, they'll assess what's going on, they'll orientate themselves, and ultimately they'll make decisions and act, and they'll make the best decisions that they can to protect the public. And some of the feedback that's come through to me, it's quite poignant. It's saying sometimes they turn up with 5 firefighters and it isn't enough to fulfill everything they want to do in the initial stages. They have to wait for backup crews before they can do that. All 3 of us as officers now have all been in that position because we all started as firefighters too. We've turned up first at huge incidents where there is chaos, where you do need additional crews and backup and support before you can execute the plan that you want to. But the overwhelming feedback that we're getting is that people want to continue with the trial. And just really before I close, the concerns that have been raised by the Fire Brigades Union, through the motion as well through this council, did prompt us to go and ask again our on-call workforce whether they wish the trial to continue. We want to listen to the voices of our workforce. And for myself administering and overseeing this trial, I was really clear that I would agree to the majority in terms of that decision. 67% of our on-call staff voted again in favour. 23 were against. Sorry, this is percentage. 67% in favour, 23% against, 10% were split 50-50. Newcastle and Kidsgrove, your local firefighters, all voted in favour of continuing the trial. So therefore, the service is going to listen to those. We're going to continue to see the trial through to its conclusion in December, learning as we go along, and we will obviously continue to monitor and evaluate the results as we go forward. The final point I just want to touch upon, and I'm more than happy to open to any questions, Chair, is around public consultation. I know there was some criticism about the level of public consultation. Well, there is a statement, and we pledged through public consultation that we needed to be flexible with our response options going forward. And that was done over the life of what we call our plan, our safety plan, which takes us up to 2024. So whereas we've not been specific to this trial, we have been clear with the public that we need to keep testing and trialing different ways of responding more efficiently to benefit public safety. We would argue that this trial indeed fits that bill. However, we want to remain transparent, and that relationship with the public is really important. So we will consult specifically on this particular trial as we refresh our next iteration of the safety plan over the next few months. So that's absolutely guaranteed from our perspective. So more than happy, as I say, to open up to any questions at your request, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, is there any questions? Councillor Jones, Councillor Reid, and then we'll move on to the next row.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to thank the Chief Fire Officer, Deputy Fire Officer, and the local station commander for coming tonight and for a thorough going through of a response to the motion. I think that's exceptionally helpful and indicative of where consultation can help improve things. I've got a few things I'd like to, as you might guess, explore around Riding 3 and really try and get my head around how this is working and how you are implementing this operationally. And I think maybe if we go back to the example you gave in Brood, I think it was, of the tumble dryer fire. So my understanding, it's a house fire effectively started by a tumble dryer with a vulnerable person inside the property, that it was accessible because neighbours had decided to intervene during the mobilisation of the appliance Riding 3. Those neighbours had intervened and removed the source of the house fire. So can you talk me through what would have happened if those neighbours hadn't intervened, and that appliance has turned up and there is a house fire with a vulnerable individual involved?
Yeah, first I'll take a couple of points and then I'll hand over to Glenn because I haven't got the full detail. So firstly, the neighbours wouldn't have known how many firefighters we've been mobilised on that appliance, so that didn't come into their psyche at all. I think the point the Deputy Chief is making is that very often at house fires we get members of the public, and we had one a couple of years ago where it ended up in a fatality. So an individual had exited the property, they then went back in to search for their dog and unfortunately got overcome by smoke. Now, the point we're trying to make at the moment is that it doesn't take 5 firefighters to stop an individual re-entering a property. One firefighter or any number of firefighters can stop that happening. There's also a lot of other actions that happen at a house fire or at a road traffic collision that don't take 5 firefighters to complete. So if we're thinking about putting in an inexhaustible water supply, for example, getting the hydrant lid, flushing the hydrant, putting the standpipe on and running hose to the property, that can happen while other appliances are making their way to the incident. If we're talking about middle of the night and we're having to make an entry into the property, the breaking in tools can be utilised with 1, 2, 3 or 4 firefighters. They can prepare that scene so when the rest of the backup gets there, there isn't any further delay. If we didn't mobilise those 3 firefighters, there would be a further delay, because not only would their travel times be elongated, but also when they get there, they've got to do those peripheral tasks before starting with the firefighting action. So I think that's what the Deputy Chief was alluding to. I'll let him go into the detail of the Brood call, because as I said, I haven't got that detail myself.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think really you've answered the main points. I mean, the initial call came through as a property fire. So it wasn't known that there was any persons involved. And indeed, that was the case when the crew got there. It was only, through their observations that they realised that there had been an elderly lady inside the property at the time of the fire who had exited the property when they got there. So in terms of the mobilisation protocol for the trial as agreed by the policy, it was correct. But what it does demonstrate is the value of having emergency services workers there at the scene as soon as they possibly can to make interventions, to give first aid in that case, and obviously to make sure the tumble dryer was fully extinguished. You asked, Councillor, about if the neighbours hadn't have removed the tumble dryer. Well, I think the likelihood is that that fire would have escalated. And again, if the crew of 3 had not been mobilised there and the tumble dryer was still inside the house, obviously building up the fire, then the 2 next appliances would have faced what would be presumably a far more developed fire and far more dangerous situation for them to deal with.
So Thank you very much for that really, really thorough response. So I am trying to understand this. I think it is critical. So the appliance with 3 on it wouldn't, if they'd arrived, there was a property fire, they wouldn't be entering that property, but they would be able to do preparatory work for the appliance with 4 to arrive.
Very much depends upon the scenario.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah,
that.
But they would be taking a range of meaningful actions to bring the fire under control, to make things better for the public and for the oncoming firefighters.
But if they had to utilise breathing apparatus, they wouldn't be entering. Is that my understanding?
Correct,
as 3, they wouldn't enter. They would need 4. Okay. So I guess my next question is: I completely understand, but we are looking at this in terms of resident safety. And what we have is a situation, and I do understand where the appliance that has turned up with 3 is able to do proprietary work to help speed up the appliance that arrives with 4. However, in the meantime, we do have a crew that cannot enter that property, assuming that they need to use breathing apparatus, cannot enter and rescue the individual. They'll have to wait for the appliance of 4. And I guess that's my concern, because the shift in the model is that I guess you would have previously, the crew that arrived in 3 previously before this, and correct me if I'm wrong, they would have been riding 4 as a minimum. I'm not sure I completely understand.
Yeah, sorry, councillor. I do understand where you're coming from. Previously, they wouldn't have been mobilised at all. So there would have been a delay for resident safety because you're waiting for the next nearest appliance who has got 4 of a minimum. So the 3 wouldn't even be in the equation. And that's the binary choice that I was trying to explain. The other point that I do think is relevant, Chair, is, and I understand we need to focus on the property fire, the house fire scenario. They are a very small percentage of the full range of incidents that our crews are mobilised to. So if we think about small fires, they can deal with that by themselves. Road traffic collisions, they're making life-saving interventions. Animal rescues in water is a really good case in point, because we know from our lived experience that the longer the delay in having an emergency crew attend those, far higher the chance that the public are going to enter the water, particularly in the winter periods. We've been to loads, the Chief and I personally, where people have then entered the water to save the animal because there's a delay in the emergency services. So I just want to convey the point that it's about getting a quicker response to the wide range of incidents that we have to deal with. Thank you.
Reid, I'll come back to you.
Hi, and thanks again for just, giving such a kind of thorough, and detailed overview tonight. It's been really interesting to hear. Just quick question. We understand that the availability of the 2 fire appliances here at Newcastle, I think were in 2021, 100% and 98% available, respectively. In 2022, we understand that this is reduced to 100% to just 17% available to the people of the borough. I think that's from the SFRS Freedom of Information Register. Do you think you can kind of maintain the previous availability?
I think availability on the call is very, very difficult. It's getting more and more difficult as society changes. It's a 1930s, 40s system trying to operate in 2023. And traditionally, family generation after generation will be on call or retained firefighters. They'd live and work in the same village and they'd maintain the availability of the fire appliance. That is very different now. As we know, society's changed. Earnings have changed completely and it's becoming more and more difficult. At the same time, and I will talk, and I'll let Andy come in about some of the challenges we've had at Newcastle Fire Station.
Yeah,
we've had to deal with some inappropriate behaviours within the on-call system. You will have seen the national approach around some of the issues that the fire and rescue sector are dealing with. When I came into office in 2021, the first thing that I did was publish a statement of intent, basically a zero tolerance statement. And I've been very swift in terms of acting. Every time inappropriate behaviours manifest themselves, I'll deal with them swiftly and robustly. And I think everybody in this room would agree that's the right thing to do. We've had some of those issues at Newcastle. I've had to deal with them and we've had to exit a number of our on-call firefighters out of the service as a result of that. So those drops that you talk about have partly been because of that. Now, Andy can talk about the difficulty of getting somebody from Civilian Street to a fully competent operational firefighter and how long that takes. And we are seeing some green shoots of improvement, but it does take a while. So I'll just hand over to Andy.
Evening all. Thanks, Chair. Councillor, just to answer your question on a couple around the availability. The Chief's right. There has been some challenges in my tenure over at Newcastle in the 4 years I've been there. To get a firefighter from civilian street to a competent can take up to 3 years. So that's why as soon as you have a hit of competent trained firefighters, whether that be drivers, incident commanders, whatever that may be, BA wearers, straight away you're going to take a significant hit because that's going to hit your availability. And you're right, 3 years ago it was reasonable. We took a hit because of what we touched on. I'd just like to say, since what the Deps talked about there, June this year was the significant highest amount, 35% it's gone up to in June. And that coincides with what we've just been talking about. That's the highest we've had for 12 months. Now, as you know, over at Newcastle, we have 2 different shift systems over there. We have a 24/7, 365 days a year, whole time. You're always going to get an appliance. That generally ranges from 99 to 100% availability. The 1% is generally when we have to have a defective appliance and we have to have a change of appliance when it goes for a major service or whatever. That's just nature of the beast. The on-call side of things, those that you've been to see me will know, this is their secondary, tertiary job. It's not their primary job. They do it for what the Chief and Dep have spoken about, generally to serve the community of Newcastle Borough. Now, I can categorically tell you that if we want to talk about a reduced crewing model or a 3-rider model, they want to go out the doors and serve the community. And you talk about the 3% of the house fires, and I take your point, but they want to go out the doors to serve their community. That's what they joined for. Now, previously, if we needed 4 or 5 riders, because of the reduced crew, because of the things we alluded to, they weren't being mobilized to anything straight away. The biggest issue we've got, recruitment, retention. I was losing firefighters because they weren't going through the doors doing what they thought they joined to do. If this alerter doesn't go off, what are they here to do? I'm losing firefighters. I'm straight away. I've got my back against the door. I'm struggling to keep firefighters. So straight away, with what we're trying in here, I've got firefighters now. The culture's improved. The morale's improved. They've got a reason to come to the fire station. They're going to turn out to calls. So straight away, that's given me a stronger arm, if you like, to recruit people. So I was down to 4 on occasions of on-call firefighters 18 months, 2 years ago. I'm hoping by the end of October, we'll be up to 15. We'll have 15. We've quadrupled the number of firefighters. Yes, it's taken time. And yes, they're not all qualified to wear BA or drivers. However, to get the numbers through the door is the most difficult thing. We can train them. We can qualify them. You know, we can get to the point where we're happy to get them on the back of a fire appliance. That's 15. That for me is a huge achievement. And that's where we're seeing the increase in availability that you talk about. So I'm hopeful that, yes, it'll take time. I'm not arguing it's going to take time. And you know what? I'd rather it take time and get it right than do it quick and get it wrong. And I've suddenly lost a lot of firefighters. So you're right. It is increasing. And that's what we're seeing. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Oh, thanks for just that.
Wanted, sorry. Hey, I was close.
Thank you, Chair. My background may seem very different to yours in that I'm an expert in early childhood education, but one of the things that is a great concern is when we cut staff and we have higher ratios of staff, lower ratios of staff to children in terms of quality and safety. So to hear that there are less officers going out does, you know, cause the public and people like myself to be concerned. I was interested when you said that both you and the union are lobbying for more money to be put into the fire service. So a simple question, would you be doing this trial if the resources were all available?
I think it's always a difficult one, particularly with on-call resources. Money isn't always going to solve the problem. The issues I talked about with societal issues that we're seeing people aren't joining the on-call service, and people always see the on-call service as a part-time job. Now, when I say to you that part-time job would entail you being available to respond to incidents between 80 and 120 hours per week, that doesn't seem like a part-time job. You have to be within 5 minutes of the fire station all of the time you're on call. So you can see the restriction that that gives to anybody. You can't go shopping without fear of your pager going off. You can't take the kids swimming or do anything, you know, any extracurricular school activities. It's very, very restrictive. We need to be flexible in our approach. So even if I had a load more money, I don't think the problem with on-call availability would be solved overnight. Might help a little bit. And then I need to make sure that we've got as much money into the service as we can to deal with some of the things that Glenn alluded to earlier, making sure the training is at the highest possible level. Because the numbers I've talked about, the 29% reduction, we've got fewer firefighters now than we had 10 years ago. But actually, we've also, thankfully, through the work of our prevention and protection, got fewer house fires than we had 10 years ago. We lose fewer people in house fires today than we did 10 years ago. So there's not a direct correlation. And coming back to the house fire point, and that's the one that everybody focuses on for obvious reasons. We had 229 house fires within the county, the whole of the county last year. 54.4% of those house fires, so over half of them, were either out on arrival or were limited to the item first ignited. So somebody had dropped a tea towel on a hot plate and it had flared up, called the fire service, but it was out when we got there. 3 riders can go and deal with that incident. And the bits that Andy's alluded to there, the morale of those people, because if you're putting your life on hold for 120 hours a week, and you've seen another fire engine come past your house when you've put your life on hold, and just because there's 3 of you, you're not going to get mobilised, it's demoralising. And they leave the service and they go and do something different. We want to keep hold of those people, give them something meaningful to do, but more importantly, improve community outcomes. And the issue that the Deputy Chief alluded to, that elderly lady definitely had improved outcomes because those people could get medical care to her far quicker than waiting another 7 minutes before 4 people turned up. Those 3 people wouldn't have been mobilised under the traditional approaches. So I think, you know, in answering your question, we'll always gratefully accept more money and we'll always lobby for that, but it isn't always going to be pumped into the response side of the organisation. We've been really proactive in terms of turning the tap off, turning the demand tap off, working upstream of an incident ever occurring, so somebody's life isn't torn apart by a fire, by a road traffic collision. Is far more, it improves community outcomes far more than response ever will. Because if you think about response, it's only ever damage limitation. The incident has already occurred before we've even had the call. If we work from a preventative side, people won't have the incident in the first place. So that's where we'd like to invest more of the money.
Thank you. Could I just ask one quick follow-up? Going back to your HMI inspection report that you've already alluded to, one of the required improvements was about making sure that you were keeping people safe and secure from fire, and also making sure the service looks after its people. Are you confident that this model that you're trialing will contribute to that aim?
Yes, I mean, talking about keeping people safe from fire, that's talking about the prevention side of the organisation, because that's how you truly keep people safe from fire. In terms of looking after our people, I definitely think that there is a issue that Andy's alluded to around making sure their morale is kept where it needs to be. It's about their mental well-being as well. And as I've said, we go out to numerous on-call teams and the morale's been quite low because they know they're trained, they're highly professional individuals. And just because they've dropped from 4 riders to 3 riders, they're not getting sent out of the door to do the job that they joined. And the moral pressure that the Deputy Chief alluded to, there's another moral pressure as well, particularly in some of our more rural communities where we've got on-call firefighters. And one on-call firefighter at Ipston explained to me the other day that we're not thinking about the moral pressure that they have when there's an incident in their village and they're not even mobilised to it, and then somebody gets hurt or sadly passes away. They've got to go and face their neighbours, their community members in the street and answer the question, well, why didn't you turn up to, why weren't you available? And they're restricted by the current traditional policy. So there's a moral pressure on both sides that I have to try and balance.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Adcock, I will come back to you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you. And thank you for your presentation here tonight. I think you've made some very reasoned and good points. Of course, as a fire service, I'm sure your first duty is to the public, and when the public phone in a fire incident, unless, you know, it's a case of, do you want a response now, but we only have 3 firefighters, or would you like to wait and we might have 4, but we can't guarantee that. I think most people logically would want to go for, we want the quickest response times. But of course, I'm not an expert on fire and fire safety, but the firefighters are. And if our firefighters are telling us that this is a good trial and they want to continue with it and it's getting better outcomes, that's certainly something we should be listening to. And I really welcome it. I think it also shows why this is the right forum to have this discussion here at Scrutiny, because we've had to hear all the points we didn't know at full council. And when we have motions at full council, we don't have all the facts and we haven't heard from the fire service themselves, it's not really fair for us. So I think it's been a good discussion here at Scrutiny. And I think in future, that's where these discussions should be held. I do have a question. So this is a trial and it's ongoing. At what point does it become, well, what are the next steps for the trial? At what point do you say, you know, this trial's been a success, or it hasn't worked, or it needs to be tweaking, or is this just continual, or is there a time scale to this?
Thank you for the question and the comments, Councillor. Indeed, this is a true trial and we are making sure that it will be fully evaluated. So it's due to conclude in December. Monitoring has gone on from day one in terms of the data, feedback responses, ongoing checks through management about people, how they're feeling, and indeed recognising the important part of representative bodies as well, and putting their views into it. So it will be fully scrutinised through our own internal governance, and that will then have a decision whether to continue with the trial or not at that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Before I let Councillor Jones have a say, I'll I've never been a firefighter. I've never been trained. You wouldn't have me. Tell you, if it's a 2-foot ladder, I'm not doing it. You've got the experience. You've got the know-how. And I bow down to your experience. You put a few years in yourself, 22 years, 26. I've never kept a job for that long, I don't think. So between you, you've got a lot of years. 27. Ooh, come on, we might as well have it. Only 24. Oh, he's a newbie then. Yeah. So you've got a hell of a lot of experience. You know what you're talking about. You've said before, your response to the public is to get there. With 3, you can get there sooner than what you can if you've got to wait for 4. You're not saying that 4th person can't turn up. He can turn up, but if he's sick, if he's ill, if his kids are ill, you still can operate. And that's the main thing. You can operate and you're there for the public. I'll let you have your say, and then I'm going to let Councillor Jones have his.
Firstly, I have to say, well, he or she turns up because, you know, we're a very diverse.
Old-fashioned.
But yeah, it's really important. We've got a lot of experience, but we don't take that lightly. We wouldn't implement a trial that's going to put any of our firefighters in undue risk. We will make a very calculated decision in terms of introducing this trial. And as we've said at the start, our position is we want 4 firefighters and an on-call fire engine. We want 5 on a whole-time fire engine. We want as many professional firefighters available to turn out. But what we are saying is when those numbers drop, we're not going to say we won't turn out to the public, because I think it's our duty to make sure we make an attendance on each and every occasion. And we don't want long attendance times that we see in some other emergency services. We want to be there and want to make an intervention. As we've said, we can't solve everything on every occasion. Even if we had 25 fighters, we go to some incidents and we still need more. But we can make early interventions to stabilise the situation, stop it getting any worse, stop it spreading to adjacent properties. and make sure we make that medical intervention as well.
Right, Councillor Jones, I did promise you, so you can have the final word.
Thank you very much, Chair. Really appreciate it. Actually, I've got just an additional question, and then I would like to move a recommendation after that. So if I could make the initial question and then come back to the recommendation following that. So just wanted to flip my experience. Obviously, I've worked alongside emergency services, providing clinical support. And one of the situations I used to face prior to moving up here and taking a desk job is that I was often on the end of the phone when we had an RTA, because I would be there with the team prepping for receipt of the patient, which was often brought in by you guys removing the individual from the vehicle. I guess my question is, talk me through a crew of 3 arriving at an RTA where a patient or an individual needs to be removed, what they would be doing, whether they would be able to remove the individual, because I know certainly our guidelines are that you wouldn't have 3 staff trying to mobilize a person with potential spinal injury. And if you could talk me through that a little bit, and then after that, I'd just like to make a recommendation that hopefully committee will feel that they would like to support.
Okay, so firstly, obviously not knowing your background before, but understand now, technology's moved on massively in terms of road traffic collisions. The equipment that we use is very different to probably the equipment that you were aware of. So our cutting equipment now is all battery powered, or the majority is battery powered. So we used to have a situation where there was a generator, some hydraulic hose, and then a cutting tool on the end of the hydraulic hose. That meant that one firefighter had to manage the hydraulic hose, another firefighter had to use the cutting equipment, and then make access into the car. So the crew of 3, and we did some testing a few years ago when we had a smaller vehicle on test down at the Fire Service College. The crew of 3 could do all the RTC or RTA scenarios that you're referring to. So we could use the cutting equipment, we could stabilise the vehicle, we could make space creation whilst our medical colleagues or ambulance colleagues were stabilising the patient. So I haven't got an issue in terms of crews of 3 being able to do those actual tasks in terms of the cut. They can also do other things, putting the cones out, making sure the road's closed, stopping other traffic, making sure the scene is safe. So through the testing, we've improved the technology. We've also made sure that the policies and procedures are in place, and we've got a safe system of work to make sure we get access and that individual can get to primary care as quickly as possible.
Could I just add to that, please? Sorry, just briefly. Just to clarify that the crew of 3 would not be sent as a sole attending pump to that sort of scenario. They would be part of a multiple pump response, but it is conceivable that they could get there first. So as the chief said, number 1 for me, close the road, make the scene safer than what it is, deal with the fire. Potentially there's a fire now, you know, particularly with the new battery powered vehicles, that constitutes an even bigger risk. Stabilizing the vehicle, managing the glass, dealing with the immediate casualty care scenarios, which could be as simple as opening an airway, stemming bleeding, that sort of things. They can make a start. The crews themselves are training. The training is exactly the same as the whole time around road traffic collisions with modern techniques and the tools that they have available. So that's just a flavour of talking you through the tangible actions that they could take as a first pump on the scene. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, just to reiterate what I said previously, I really appreciate the answers you're giving and going through the examples that I've been going through. I did say, and I was teasing a recommendation. You have mentioned that you're currently undergoing a trial with this response model of 3. I wonder if a recommendation, certainly I'll move this recommendation, that we would invite the chief fire officer, deputy fire officer, and the station commander for Newcastle back to present to committee at the end of the trial your findings from that, and that we can equally in good faith, provide some scrutiny for you on that.
Yes, we're
answer
fine
that
to do
first.
that. And as I said at the start, I think it's really important that we have a really strong relationship with you as a scrutiny committee, because, you know, no matter how open mind one thinks one is, when you work in somewhere for 26, 27 years, you can become very narrow focused. We want to make sure that we get as many eyes looking at things and giving a different perspective, because that makes a more rounded outcome. So yeah, more than happy to come back and discuss the evaluation when it's completed in December.
Well, you don't need go on, Councillor Norcup.
I'm quite happy to second that.
I take it we don't really want to vote because they've already said that you're willing to come back. So
as we have a proposer and a seconder, it would be awfully awkward not to vote on
all right,
that.
if you want to vote, but you've already been told that they're willing to come back. Yeah. Yeah. All right, then. All those in favour, raise your hand. Are you happy? Yeah, you got to vote. Thank you. Thank you very much for... Hold on. Councillor Sweeney.
Allowing me to speak, I appreciate it. Yeah, when this motion came to the council, I felt it was out of order. I'll be honest with you. I thought it was grossly unfair, really, that the Labour Party were criticising highly professional firefighters, and the highly professional firefighters.
Is scrutiny supposed to be a political podium? And if Councillor Sweeney is able to speak about the motion, as the proposer of the motion, I would like to have a right of response.
You can have a right to respond if you want, and you can.
But I'll be very quick. I've not much to say. Well, and I think, as Councillor Adcock says, this is the chamber where these things should be discussed. This is scrutiny. You know, the senior officers are here. They know they've got. You know, they're here prepared to ask questions, and you're here prepared to ask some questions. And I believe that's the way these things should be done, rather than in the council chamber, when the senior professional officers from the fires weren't there. It just wasn't fair to me. Thank you. And if you want to come back on your motion, feel free.
Right. Hold on. One thing before you come back. Councillor Adcock, would you please take the seat? I've got to go work.
Okay, Chair.
Chair, can I take it from that I can just briefly respond to that as a right of reply?
Of course you can, but he's going to take the chair. I've got to go work.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I think what I would say is that the motion was proposed, and we have the Chief Fire Officer, the Deputy Chief Fire Officer, and the Station Commander here in front of us at scrutiny. I'm not sure the last time we had those assembled officers in front of us at this scrutiny committee, but it seems like the motion has induced that scrutiny effect. And I take Councillor Adcott's comments that actually this is the right forum for it. And if a motion needed to occur for that to happen, then the motion served its purpose. Thank you.
Jones, I believe Councillor Heason would like to speak on this.
Yeah, I'd just like to clarify that the fire were always going to come to the scrutiny committee. It wasn't as a result of the motion. It was just that this is the time they were coming, but they were always in the schedule to come here.
Unless anyone else to speak on this, I think we should move on to the next item on the agenda. Item 10, cycle routes and lane provisions. I believe I've got Annabelle Chell here to speak on this as presentation. Thank you very much.
I know. I hope it's worth it.
Bad luck and bad luck.
Of course, lots of trouble here, haven't I?
Should we move on to the next agenda item and come back to this, give you time to sort out the IT? Would that be okay? There's just a work program. If we want to discuss that, we'll come back. If that's all right with everybody. So let's look at item 11, work program, pages 97 to 100. You'll see what's on the work program. Obviously, we want to add the fire officers returning. So that'll be on the meeting. I assume the one after December. The next one we have after that will be the one where we want them to come back and present their findings on the trial. Does anyone else got any comments, additions, suggestions for the work program?
Hello. I did suggest that there was an item on kind of obesity and the local council's response through the leisure centres to increase young people's exercise on the work programme, but nothing's on there. So
so an item on tackling obesity in younger people.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the response of the local authority through the leisure centres and getting young people to kind of participate in exercise.
Okay.
Particularly young people.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll look at adding that to the work program to speak to the
Okay.
officers and see what we can present.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, Councillor Easton.
Yeah, do you think it'd be possible for us to ask somebody from the police team to come and talk us through the right care, right person that's potentially coming to Staffordshire?
Oh, that as well. See if we can get to come along. John Owen's coming, Borough Commander. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously not a regular member of this committee, so I felt a bit awkward proposing things, but I'm going to anyway. Because I'm here. I just wonder, and please correct me, I'm happy to be corrected if this has already been considered, but residents often approach me quite regularly at the moment around provision of NHS dental care and capacity for that. I just wonder if that's something that could go on the work programme to speak to commissioners about the provision of NHS dental care, because I know certainly for a number of my residents, it's one of their biggest concerns.
Councillor Hewson.
I was talking to, don't know if you know Christian Mallon at all. I was talking to him the other day and he's lobbying, isn't he, to try and get a school of dentistry at Keele. So maybe that'll be able to come through on the programme, maybe an update like that.
I now have to declare an interest as an employee of the University of Keele, who may or may not be responsible for setting up a dental school.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones. No, we're doing well there. We've got a few items for the work programme. Now we just await item 10. All that it is, you know, the presentation is essentially a version of what you've got in your agenda pack if you're able to see it. So if we're happy to crack on when you have the presentation in front of yourselves, that might save us some time. If everyone's happy with that, yeah, then I think we'll crack on. So shall I hand over to you, Annabelle, and then you present on the cycle lanes?
Yes, do you mind if I have your copy? Right. Good evening, everybody. I lead the connectivity strategy team at Staffordshire County Council. We are the transport planning team that is writing the new local transport plan for Staffordshire, and we provide the transport policy and strategy advice to all district councils on their local plans. We are also proactive in bidding and securing funds for transport improvements when opportunities become available. I have been asked to talk with you today about our investment in the cycle network in Newcastle. So the next slide. National policy is steering our current priority in improving facilities for all forms of active travel. In 2017, government introduced local cycling and walking infrastructure plans that we call LCWIPs, and recommended a new approach to planning networks for walking and cycling. 3 years later, Gear Change, closely followed by Local Transport Note 120, were published as national guidance, announcing a step change in cycling and walking. LTN 120 makes fundamental changes in design standards, stressing the need for a sharp improvement in infrastructure. The current government vision is that 50% of short urban trips are walked or cycled by 2030. Next slide. So we published our first version of Staffordshire's LCWIP in 2019, and we'll be revising the document as part of the development of the LTP during 2024, including more detailed plans for our smaller towns such as Kidsgrove. We are making some progress on delivering our priorities for Newcastle. This plan on the page that you're hopefully looking at now shows the red routes that are committed and completed, the blue routes that we are actively seeking funding for, the orange routes that are the existing cycle network, and the dashed blue corridors that we still need to consider in order to achieve a more comprehensive network. Okay, next slide. In line with the Borough Council's town investment plan, we are prioritising connectivity within Newcastle's east to west corridor between Keele University, Silverdale, Newcastle Town Centre, and tying into Stoke-on-Trent cycle network that has onward connections to Stoke Rail Station. As you know, we've completed the first section on George Street, shown in red. Through the Borough Council's Towns Fund, we are completing the green sections, and we are seeking funding to complete the pink section. We have also secured funds for the blue section that provides the east-west connection to Silverdale. So next slide is Hassel Street Barracks Road route. Our engineers will be commencing detailed consultation on the next phase of the east-west route in October. It includes a two-way cycle route along Hassel Street, widening of pavements and improving the public realm around the Hassel Street Barracks Road junction, a widened splitter island, an upgraded crossing facility across Barracks Road, and a shared use cycle facility linking north to the civic offices. In order to improve the public realm at Barracks Road junction, we are proposing to maintain the left turn lane into Windsor Street, but remove the second option of turning left into Hassel Street. Next slide. The next phase is to find the best route for cyclists through Newcastle Town Centre that is convenient for cyclists, but avoids the pedestrianised areas. On the plan, you'll see our proposed route that connects Merial Street along Corporation Street, Hitman Street and Bridge Street to the existing subway under the A34, where cyclists will currently need to walk with their bikes. I must emphasise that detailed designs have not commenced on this section, but we are going to work with the Borough Council to ensure that the Rycroft development designs incorporate this route. So next slide. Regarding the route to Keele, we have chosen to pursue a well-signed, legible, suburban, quieter route, as road space is not available to provide a continuous high-standard cycle lane all the way along the A525. The route makes use of existing shared facilities and quiet residential streets, with investment needed at key points to widen the route to accommodate both walkers and cyclists. If funding can be secured, this could include reconstruction of the existing off-road bridge that leads to Orme Road. So next slide is Gallastree Lane Junction. So this is being delivered as part of your Towns Fund investment plan. The suburban route links to Gallastree Lane roundabout and onwards along existing provision to Keele. The Toucan crossing on Cemetery Road and the footway widening will be completed this year. And then next slide. Funding has been secured and detailed design and consultation will commence on this second east-west link between the George Street scheme to the Greenway and onwards to Nutton and Silverdale. This proposal includes a crossing facility on the A52 to Water Street, a new junction layout at the King Street Borough Road junction to make it easier to navigate for pedestrians and cyclists, widening the footways along station walks, a control crossing on Queen Street, and enhanced crossing provision on Hempstalls Lane. If funding allows, we also propose to look at delivering improvements at the A34 underpass in the form of lighting and vegetation cutback. But I must emphasise that consultation and detailed design on this section of the route hasn't yet commenced. To tie into these, so next slide. To tie into these east-west proposals, Sistrans have been looking at the potential to improve accessibility to the Greenway for communities along the route, recognising the genuine concerns regarding antisocial behaviour. Data suggests that usage of this asset is low compared to other urban greenways in other towns. My suggestion is that we have organise a walk along this route with local community members to try to identify improvements that we could make that recognise the issues of antisocial behaviour. So if anybody is interested in being part of this, please let me know. So this next slide. This presentation focuses on cycle routes as requested by this committee, but the priority for government investment is for the walking environment as well as cycling. So our revised local cycle walking infrastructure plan, which will be developed alongside our local transport plan, is focusing on the walking environment in our smaller towns, where cycle investment is more difficult to justify due to the low numbers of cyclists. To start this process, we have commenced auditing the most well-used walking routes in Kidsgrove and Torque based on GIS analysis. Not surprisingly, this focuses on routes to schools, the rail station and local centres. We'll be consulting on this work soon and would value your views on our recommendations. So finally, regarding school journeys, bids to Active Travel England that include school streets are welcomed and have the potential to secure funding. They are being delivered by other local authorities and rely on the temporary removal of moving traffic outside school gates at drop-off and pick-up times, giving the street environment back to pedestrians for this short period within the day. As yet, we haven't delivered any school streets in Staffordshire, but we are keen to discuss the idea with councillors and identify any schools where it could work. So that's the end of my presentation. Happy to receive any questions now, or obviously there's quite a lot of detail on those plans. So if you want to arrange any further discussions of any detail on any particular issues, please let me know, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Has anyone got any questions for Annabelle now? Councillor Barker.
I don't know if it's part of what you're doing, but there is a walking and cycling group who I've introduced Just Operating. It's very well organised, so I wonder if it is part of this.
Do you mean the social prescribing pilot that's going on in Nutton and Silverdale?
No,
no,
mine's Chesterton.
Oh, right, sorry.
And he's coming to a patient panel meeting next week.
It is
so I
that.
wondered
Yeah.
if this all
It is.
linked in.
Yes, it is a project that we're part of a pilot scheme. It's called a social prescribing project, based on wards of Nutton, Silverdale, Chesterton, to basically work with doctor surgeries to get people who have health issues, obesity issues, mental health problems, to, rather than be prescribed going to the gym, etc., they're basically put on these sort of courses and activities that encourage people to think about active travel as part of their everyday lives. So yeah, so obviously the Greenway and those links to those areas basically help sort of, this is the infrastructure element to that project. Yeah.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. Apologies, I had to leave midway through at point, but I think first of all I'm going to say a few things. I think this proposal is really excellent. I think the changes to Gallows Tree Roundabout are really critical and are going to make some real change for those who choose to cycle down that route. I would also say that I've sent these plans to Mrs. Jones, who does this route quite often. I should say Dr. Jones, actually, who does this route quite often. She cycles daily from Keele to the hospital, as do quite a lot of staff who work across both the hospital and the university. They like to cycle. And one of her comments as a user of this is that her and a number of other cyclists are less inclined to use a route that goes onto the Greenway, which is one that we would want them to do because of the convoluted nature of that route. And I know obviously that's a case where it's inevitable that there is going to be a convoluted route because there'll be obstacles in the way that you can't simply produce a cycle track through. I just wonder, in terms of engagement, have we engaged, or you engaged with the hospital and staff at the hospital, or groups at the hospital? Because I know there is a cyclist group at the hospital, and similarly at Keele, where there's a cyclist group at Keele, because I think they might have that, I would say on the ground, but on the bike experience of doing those routes. But anything that keeps the wife off the main road, I'd really encourage, because that bit is quite treacherous.
Yes, I think the point is that the standards that government asks for now on main roads is that the cycles are segregated from pedestrians and traffic, and to physically get that cycle infrastructure in, that because obviously you've got to connect from the town across the ring road onto the A525. There's basically not the space. So the route that we've picked on a map isn't actually, I think it's got to be well signed, I think, because on a map, it's actually not that much further and it's safer and quieter. But so that's why we've chosen this route, because we need to find that east-west connection somehow. And this seemed to be a better, quieter route that was not so expensive either to deliver, because you don't need an awful lot. We're sort of making use of the existing cycle network. And on your second point is we are always keen to engage with cycle groups, and it's so I'd love to have those contacts. Just
quickly to come back on that really quickly. I think that's the message to get out, that the route, you know, as cyclists are coming down here, they'll be thinking, oh God, that you look at the map, you go, that's going to take me so much longer. Where if it isn't, I think that's the key
Yeah.
messaging, because
Signing, it's got to be legible
yeah,
and signed, well
if they
signed.
know it's only going to take the same amount of time to
Yeah.
go a safer route, brilliant.
And on a bike, I think you prefer to be a little bit safer and
Yeah.
take a couple of minutes longer. Well, I personally do anyway.
Right, Councillor Rees.
Thanks for that, Annabelle. It's really great. This is just a point of clarity. On the first map slide, we've got the red line in Woolstanton, where I'm a councillor for. I'm assuming that's a committed route rather than a completed one. Because I can't really kind of tell from the map where.
Oh, that's the it's a Truria Valley Link Road, the red, and then there's a route along the A500.
Right.
Isn't there?
And you talked about that connectivity into Stoke. Is that?
Well, that obviously, I haven't actually been down the Truria Valley Link Road yet, but presumably there's a cycle lane along the Truria Valley Link Road. That red line is supposed to represent that.
Right. I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Councillor Diamond.
Thank you. Can I just ask on the Kids Grove and Talk on, we've got all these little
Yes.
blue lines. I'm assuming, what did you say that
Yeah.
you found
So
out that these people, that's the main walking routes that people use?
Yeah. So to get funding from government, they tell you how you are supposed to analyse routes in terms of identifying the likelihood of higher numbers of walkers and cyclists. So it was all to do with GIS analysis.
What's GIS?
Geographical information system.
Oh, right.
So it's
Okay.
maps and data from the census that determined where we're likely to get the highest numbers of cyclists and walkers. So we're looking at those routes, but we're obviously going to consult on that as well. So if there's other routes that you think are missing, we can still audit those routes. And I'm sure that's probably what you're going to suggest.
The biggest thing. I mean, I know we're quite a lot compact together in Kids Grove, but there's a lot of people that go through Bathpool Park to come out. Well, they would if it was accessible.
Yeah.
On Peacock's Hay to cut through, to go through into Tunstall.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cyclists that use that route to come, from wherever they go through Bathpool Park, and they can go out the other way. Obviously, we've got a lot of canal work that's used, but most of that's in Cheshire anyway. But there is quite a lot of cyclists and cyclist groups in Butt Lane and Talk as well.
Brilliant. Can I get any?
Most of them meet outside the co-op on a Sunday morning in Butt Lane. They just all gather there and off they go. So they always use the main roads though, because obviously we haven't got cycle lanes going out through there. But I think it's missing a big part of Bathpool Park and that area around there. That is
I think this
heavily
focuses
used.
on walking and school data, because we have the data for schools. So we decided to focus on the journey to school, because you're more likely to get the higher numbers. And the data wasn't showing huge numbers of cyclists in these smaller towns, enough to justify millions of pounds worth.
Massively increased since COVID. Because it's one of the things people took up with cycling and walking and jogging. And so there's a lot more activity.
Well, if I could have a separate conversation with you on that, would be great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions here? Okay. All right. If we're happy, thank you, Annabelle, to accept that and move on. And I believe councillors can get in touch with you with suggestions, ideas as well at another stage, can't they? Thank you. Okay. So item 12, public question time. I'm not aware of any. So item 13, urgent business. Again, not aware of any. And I've just talked about items 14, 15. We've already covered the homelessness confidential appendix in the earlier report. So the only thing left is item 16, date of next meeting. When is the next meeting? I believe it's on is that the 27th of November? Yep, in this room. Okay, 27th of November. Right. Well done. We did 2 chairs and lots of IT issues, but we got through it. Well done, everyone. Close the meeting.